Have you ever held a piece of history in the palm of your hand and felt the thrill of discovering something no one else in the room knows about? Today, we're zeroing in on a coin that, at first glance, looks like any other pocket change, but in the hands of a savvy collector, it's a treasure. Picture this, a seemingly ordinary 1991 quarter, but if you know exactly where to look, you'll find a quirk that turns it into a collector's holy grail. Stick around, because by the end of this segment, you'll not only see what makes this coin so special, you'll understand why some examples have sold for more than a night out at the finest steakhouse. Let's wind the clock back to the early 1990s. The United States Mint was busy striking billions of quarters featuring George Washington's portrait, part of the ongoing Washington Quarter series that began way back in 1932. By 1991, production was humming at full speed at the Philadelphia and Denver facilities. These coins were intended for everyday commerce, gumball machines, parking meters, and the registers at corner stores. Back then, nobody was thinking about rare errors, most of us just wanted exact change. The story of the 1991 quarter's rise to fame begins with a simple die break. On a small number of pieces, the die that imprinted Washington's profile developed a tiny crack right through the letters, United States of America. What you see on these coins is a thin raised line, almost like a lightning bolt, slicing through the lettering. To the untrained eye, it might look like a hair or a scratch, but collectors can spot it immediately under just a bit of light. That line is a minting mistake, but to collectors, it's a badge of rarity. Not every crack on every die produces a collectible error. These weren't intentional, they were accidents that occurred only when the minting equipment was under just the right amount of stress. When the die cracks, it ejects coins with this distinctive, singular line. What's fascinating here is that the errors went unnoticed during the quality checks at the mint. Only later did a few eagle-eyed cashiers and collectors begin to notice them slipping into circulation. Over the past decade, the market for these cracked die 1991 quarters has surged. At a major auction in 2018, a single Philadelphia minted example in nearly perfect condition sold for over $1,200. A Denver specimen, arguably even rarer because fewer cracked dies were used there that year, fetched close to $1,500 at a 2021 sale. These records have only driven collector excitement higher. Every time one of these coins hits the block, bidding can become fierce, rivaling what you might see for a classic Morgan dollar. One story that really captures the coin's mystique involves a man who found a cracked die quarter while emptying his vending machine revenue. He set it aside in a small plastic bag, completely unaware of its value, and stashed it in a drawer. 10 years later, he showed it to a friend who collects state quarters. That friend's eyes nearly popped out of his head. When they looked it up, they realized that a small slip of that metal could be worth more than some people make in an entire week. He sold it for just under $1,000, enough to cover a family vacation or a serious piece of audio gear. But, of course, condition is everything. A crisp, uncirculated coin, graded MS 65 or above by a professional service like PCGS or NGC, will command the highest premium. In mint state, the raised die crack is sharp, and the fields around it are free from marks or wear. These coins can start at roughly $800 in MS 63 and climb past $2,000 the straighter and shinier they are. Once you dip into the circulated grades, say VF 30 or lower, the crack is still visible, but the wear dulls the impact, and prices fall into the $100 to $200 range. Collectors hunting for this variety often check rolls of quarters from bank change, focusing on the edge of the coin where the crack intersects the rim. A strong light at an angle and a jeweler's loupe are all you need to distinguish the genuine article. Beware, though, counterfeiters have tried to simulate this error by adding scratches, but the fake lines lack the raised, feather-like texture of a true die crack. Tactile inspection, running a fingernail gently across the line, will reveal whether it's part of the die or just a surface mark. Beyond the die crack, there are secondary quirks that can add to a particular coin's appeal. Some examples show doubling on the date or motto, remnants of a weak secondary strike. While these aren't as dramatic as the lightning bolt crack, they're still collectible and can add a few dozen dollars to the price. In fact, when you find a coin that exhibits both the cracked die and subtle doubling, you've hit a mini jackpot. It's also interesting how the story of the cracked die quarter has woven itself into the collecting community. At coin shows, you'll hear seasoned dealers swapping tales about the one that got away, the quarter someone spotted at the grocery store checkout but dismissed as just another shiny coin. Occasionally, someone will bring a batch of mixed quarters to a dealer's table, and the room goes silent when that elevated line leaps out under bright lights. For those who prefer a more hands-on approach, attending local coin club meetings can be a great way to compare notes and view high-grade specimens up close. Many collectors trade or sell raw examples, uncertified coins, at much lower prices than slabbed pieces. If you're confident in your ability to spot genuine die cracks, you can pick up raw MS-63 coins for around $600 to $700 and then have them graded for resale, or keep them in your collection for future appreciation. As someone who might already own one of these quarters, take a moment to examine your 1991s under a desk lamp. If you spot that distinct crack, you're not just holding ordinary pocket change, you're holding a piece of mint-era history. And if yours is in exceptional condition, you might be sitting on a small fortune. Even circulated examples are a fun way to diversify a collection without breaking the bank. Soon, we'll shift our focus to another standout quarter, but before that, think about this: every coin you've ever used in daily life could hide a secret like this. It's a reminder that history doesn't just live in museums, it lives in your pocket, waiting to be discovered. Keep that in mind as we flip over to our next coin, and remember, sometimes, the most extraordinary things hide in plain sight. And just like uncovering a lightning bolt etched into metal, our next treasure hides in plain sight, this time in the 1981 quarter. You might have noticed that quarters from that era look nearly identical, but a small twist in the minting process turned a handful of 1981s into prized-era coins. Think of it as finding a hidden gallery in an otherwise familiar museum wing. Let's pick up where we left off and explore how the 1981 quarter went from everyday change to the centerpiece of many collections. By 1981, the Washington quarter design was more than a half-century old, yet demand for coinage remained high. The Philadelphia and Denver mints were working overtime, churning out over 1 billion quarters that year. In Philadelphia, the mint employed dies that had already seen heavy use. On a rare few, those tired dies misaligned ever so slightly during the hubbing process, the step where the working die is impressed with the master design. The result? A classic double die error on the obverse, where Washington's profile, the date, and motto appear doubled, especially around the words "Liberty" and "In God We Trust." What makes a double die different from a simple machine doubling is that it's inherent to the die itself. When you look at a genuine 1981 double die under magnification, you'll see crisp, separated lines, a clear ghost image, rather than flat, blurred spreading of the letters. The most coveted variety, catalogued as DDR-001, shows doubling on the date and "Liberty," with the secondary impression sitting just a hair's breadth away from the primary design. Collectors often describe it as Washington wearing a shadow of himself. Only a handful of these coins slipped out before the dies were retired. In circulated grades, they're rare, in mint state, virtually unobtainable outside of auctions. Speaking of auctions, a PCGS-graded MS-64 example sold for $3,200 in late 2019, showing just how fiercely collectors pursue this variety. An MS-65 piece reached nearly $5,000 at a dedicated error coin sale in early 2022. These headline figures send ripples through the collecting world. Anytime one of these quarters pops up in someone's pocket change, it's as if someone discovered the Holy Grail in their laundry. There's a story of a collector at a regional coin show who paid a local resident $7 for a small batch of mixed quarters, mostly common date pieces. As he flipped through them, a sudden grin formed when that doubled 1 in the date jumped out. He bought the lot, had the standout graded, and capped it off with an NGC MS-66 designation. When it sold at auction 2 years later, it commanded an astonishing $12,000, proof that condition amplifies rarity exponentially. It's not just die doubling that makes the 1981 quarter fascinating. A handful of 1981 D quarters exhibit a broadstrike error, where the collar that normally crimps the coin's edge failed to engage, resulting in a slightly larger, flatter coin with a smooth rim. These broad strikes are ultra-rare because mistaken planchets almost always get caught before striking. A single 1981 D broad strike in certified MS-63 brought $2,400 at a Stack's Bowers sale in mid-2020, making it one of the hottest discoveries for short-type Washington quarters. Now, let's talk about grading and condition. In circulated grades like very fine, VF20 to VF35, you might spot doubling on the motto or date, but where masks the crispness, and values hover around $50 to $75. Move into extremely fine, EF40 to EF45, and collectors pay $200 to $300 for that hint of doubling, especially if the fields are free of distracting nicks. Once you cross into mint state territory, values leap dramatically. MS63 doubles sell around $800 to $1,200, MS65 examples routinely eclipse $5,000, and that ultra-rare MS66? It's a price-at-auction situation, expect to see bids north of $10,000. Spotting genuine double dies takes a sharp eye and a strong light. Hold the coin so that the sun or a desk lamp shines at an angle across the obverse. The shadows cast by the split lines will reveal whether it's a true double die or mere surface damage. Avoid coins where the doubling appears soft, or on the highest points only. Those are often manufacturer-induced machine doubling or post-mint wear. A loop at 10 times magnification is virtually mandatory for confident identification. For the broad strike variety, measure the coin's diameter. At 25.5 mm, it should be roughly 1 mm wider than a normal quarter. The smooth, unreeded edge and the noticeably thin profile are giveaways. These planchets without collar constriction often have distinctive flow lines in the metal radiating from the center. Beyond the technical details, what I love about the 1981 quarter is the narrative. It's a study in contrasts, a coin produced in the billions that can, in rare cases, be more valuable than gold, by weight, on the collector market. At local club meetings, dealers swap specimen photos on phones, tagging each other when a high-grade example hits eBay or when someone in the neighborhood cashes out a piggy bank. This spirited hunt keeps the hobby alive and reminds us that every coin still in circulation could be hiding an anomaly worth more than its face value. If you're on the hunt for the 1981 double die or broad strike, start with rolls of uncirculated quarters. Bank-wrapped rolls from 1981 Denver or Philadelphia are your best bet. Examine each coin under angled light before moving on, and keep a journal of roll numbers. Sometimes errors cluster in consecutive strikes from the same die, meaning you could find more than one in a single roll. Online trading forums also offer raw, ungraded examples at moderate premiums. If you're confident in your eye, you can snag coins for less than half the price of graded specimens. Even if you don't find an error, 1,981 quarters in pristine blue proof sets, the proof version produced at San Francisco, can be surprisingly collectible. The deep, mirror-like fields and sharply struck devices of a PF69 deep cameo proof sell for around $200 to $300, offering a taste of premium coin collecting without hunting for errors. So, take out those rolls or dust off the change jar and give those 1981s a close look. You're not just searching for a mistake, you're participating in a decades-long detective story, one die strike at a time. And if you do uncover that doubled profile or the broad strike's extra millimeter of metal, you'll be holding more than a quarter, you'll be holding a piece of minting history that collectors dream about. Next up, we'll flip over to our final coin of the day and discover the secrets tucked into the 1969 quarter, where silver content and unexpected varieties await. And now it's time to dive into our final highlight, the 1969 Washington quarter. On the surface, it looks just like any other piece of change from the late 60s, George Washington's dignified profile, the eagle on the reverse, and that familiar copper-nickel cladding. But hidden in the details of certain 1,969 issues are stories of minting quirks and collector goldmines that can turn your spare pocket change into something truly special. The 1969 quarter sits at a crossroads in U.S. coinage history. By this point, silver coinage had ended. 1964 was the last year for 90% silver quarters, so the 1969 pieces are all clad in that distinctive cupronickel sandwich. Production was split between Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with Philadelphia and Denver striking standard business issues and San Francisco producing proof sets for collectors. Nearly 500 million quarters left Philadelphia that year, and over 500 million came out of Denver. At first glance, these numbers make rarity seem impossible. Yet, as with many highly produced coins, it's the exceptions that command attention. One of the most sought-after varieties is the 1969 S-proof quarter with deep cameo designation. These proofs were struck on specially prepared planchets and feature frosted devices against mirror-like fields. In top grades, they show such sharp contrast that Washington's bust practically leaps off the surface. In 2022, a PCGS-graded PR70 deep cameo, meaning absolutely no flaws visible under 5 times magnification, sold for over $2,200 at a major auction. A PR69 cameo, just one notch lower, still brings around $800 to $1,200, depending on eye appeal and cameo depth. But the real treasure hunt for many collectors lies in the double die obverse, DDO, varieties from the San Francisco Proof Mint. Two main die varieties exist, FS101 and FS102, each showing subtle doubling on the motto, "In God We Trust," and the date, 1969. These errors happened when the working die received two slightly misaligned impressions from the hub. Under magnification, letters appear doubled, exact, crisp ghost images rather than the smeared look of mechanical doubling. In PR67 condition, an FS101 specimen might fetch $1,500 to $2,000, push it to PR68, and you're easily looking at $3,500 to $4,000. Extremely sharp, flawless examples in PR69 can leap past $5,000 when the bidding wars ignite. Meanwhile, business strikes from Philadelphia and Denver have their own hidden gems. The broad strike error, where the collar failed to engage and the coin flared beyond its normal 24.3 mm diameter, shows a smooth, unreeded rim and a thin, almost pancake-like profile. These broad strikes are incredibly scarce. Late 1960s equipment errors were usually caught before distribution. When a 1969D broad strike quarter in an MS63 holder came up at auction in 2021, it sold for $1,800. That same specimen, if graded MS65, might break $4,000 thanks to its rarity and the pristine look of the metal flow lines. Off-center strikes are another error that can turn a common date into a conversation piece. A quarter struck just 5% off-center might be worth $50 to $100 in circulated grades, but once you pass 10% misalignment, values shoot past $300, even in lower grades. Collectors prize the dramatic canvas of the incomplete design. The more the off-center, the more intriguing the coin, up to the point where only a sliver of the portrait remains. Condition remains king. In circulated grades like fine, F12, or very fine, VF20, most 1969 quarters, even error varieties, trade between $1 and $20. At extremely fine, EF40, you might pay $25 to $50 for a barely kicked around broadstrike or DDO example. Once you enter mint state, MS60 to MS62, values rise to $75 to $150 for errors in modestly sharp condition. MS63 to MS64 doubles or broadstrikes often land in the $200 to $400 range. And if you stumble upon an MS65 or better, prepare your budget. Prices can climb from $600 to well over $1,000, depending on eye appeal and the specific error. One of my favorite anecdotes involves a dealer who discovered 5 consecutive off-center strikes in a roll of Denver quarters. Each was about 8% misaligned, just enough to make them stand out without compromising too much of the design. He graded them at MS63 and sold the set for $2,500, proving that even a small run of related errors can be worth more than a single marquee piece. Beyond the errors, simple business strike proofs, collected in mint sets, have their own charm. A PF66 example, with its sharp strike and reflective fields, often sells for $100 to $150, while PF67 pieces command $200 to $300. These are great entry points if you're more interested in condition and strike quality than the thrill of error hunting. As you hunt through your collection or bank rolls, focus on a few key identification tips. For double dies, look for crisp doubling on the date and the tops of letters in trust. Under low light, tilt the coin until you see fine shadows splitting the letters. If the doubling looks too soft or flat, it's likely machine doubling or post-mint damage. For broad strikes, measure the diameter. Anything significantly over 24.3 mm is a strong candidate. And for off-centers, simply hold the coin by the rim and look for missing portions of the design. Any misalignment beyond 2% is worth a closer look. It's thrilling to think that even a coin minted more than half a century ago, long after silver was gone, still holds mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Whether it's the faint ghost of a double die, the airy flared edge of a broad strike, or the dramatic drama of an off-center miscue, the 1969 quarter shows us that rarity isn't just in production numbers, it's in the imperfections of human-made tools. Now that we've explored the quirks and values of our three featured quarters, let's bring it all home. From the lightning bolt die crack on the 1991 piece to the shadowy doubling and broad strikes of the 1981 issue, and finally the cameo proofs and error varieties of the 1969 quarter, we've seen how ordinary change can become extraordinary. Each coin teaches us to look beyond face value and remember that every minting press, every die, and every planchet carries its own story.